Well, what about, you were saying something about the opposite of love is not hate.
Yeah.
It is
Fear.
Yeah.
So to love something is to take it as yourself. It's just very simply the energy of pulling it into as part of you. If you feel the sensation of love, which is usually preceded by appreciative focus. So when I look at you and I say, oh, I love those blue eyes, I get a sensation of pulling closer to you. It's a fusion. When I say, I'm afraid of that, it is the exact opposite. It's a distancing. It's an isolation. That's why fear in and of itself and the extreme pain that is caused by fear is so inherently isolating. It causes me to live in a world where I am separate from everything around me. I have to be separate from everything around me. Because obviously I only fear something when I think it doesn't have my best interest at heart. And if it is me, how can that be the case? It is true that every one of us has fear. And my issue with our attitude towards fear is that there's a great many teachers who approach fear from the angle of it's the greatest enemy. Fear is the tool of the ego, and the ego is the reason you can't be happy and the reason that you feel bad, and so it becomes yet another thing to fear and hate. So the way that we need to be approaching our fears is by loving our fears. And how do you love your fears? Very simply, you treat your fear as if it's a crying child, because it is no different.
Okay.
So if I'm desperately terrified of getting close to this person, I come in and love that fear. By saying, how would you treat a child? I completely understand that you're here. I'm going to meet your needs. I'm going to help you feel better. I'm going to soothe you. That's the type of attitude we need to be taking towards our fears. Not like I'm going to push through them, or I'm going to run away from them, or I'm going to tell myself they're ridiculous, or fill in the blank. So that's radical self-love, you see.
I like that. And it makes it, it really does matter if you start to do that with yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you've been traumatized, you have a lot of fear.
And valid fear.
Just in that self.
Yes, and valid fear.
And valid fear.
And I want to say valid fear about 100 times over. Because the reality is that we live, especially in the spiritual field, we are in the business of saying that fear is an illusion and it's not real. No, you don't end up there by chance. You end up there because you've had negative experience, and that has to be honored.
So what would you say to somebody who has had a lot of trauma? If they may have your background, they may not, but they've had a lot of trauma. So what would you say about that?
Treat yourself as gently as possible. It's the missing experience. We need to experience the missing experience in our lives. Most people who have gone through trauma, they are lacking gentleness, they are lacking connection, they are lacking security. Those are the types of things they need.
And is there like a lot of anxiety that it seems like people with trauma, and it could be a lot of different reasons, but anxiety seems like to be such a huge one for people who've been through a lot of trauma.
Yes, but I can explain this really quick if you want to know why.
Oh, I would love it.
Okay, anxiety is the byproduct of self-hate.
Okay.
What it is that I'm in a situation where I'm being treated badly, and the only way that I could take responsibility, feel powerful enough, was to take complete responsibility for why that was happening to me. I'm going to do that by going into shame. It's my fault. Now, one of the reasons that it's so incredibly difficult to get people who have survived abuse out of it's my fault is because that's the only control they ever had. It's my fault is the only thing that makes me not a victim. It means I can do something about it. But it comes with a seriously heavy side dish. And that's that if it's my fault, I did something wrong and bad. And we have an internal moderator, all people do who are socialized. The internal moderator takes the place of the parents internally and says, I'm going to keep you in line. It's the voice that says, why the hell did you do that? Why did you mess up so bad? And basically punishes you. So as somebody who's been abused, you live with an abusive internal moderator. And it creates a sensation of doom constantly because you are living with the enemy.
Okay.
The people who don't have anxiety love themselves. They have a high self-concept. They don't feel like internally there's a big rift between the aspect of them that is hating them and wants to get out of them but can't, and the aspect that's traumatized and is trying to do good but can't. Yes, Shadows Before Dawn was all about self-love. Because, to be honest, every time I was trying to heal, I would go to a person, a therapist, a friend, whatever, and they always had the same answer for me, which was, you need to learn to love yourself. And it's pretty much the worst thing you could say to somebody who's suffering, who hates themselves, because what does that mean? It is so abstract. It's the same as just let go. Okay, thanks. Well, if I could have done that, I would have looked for a red button somewhere and I never found one. So basically, I was like, I'm sick of this. Like, I'm really sick of this. Like, really, really sick of it. So I have to find an answer. Like, this has got to be, it can't just be like, oh, you have to love yourself. How do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I studied people who love themselves. It was awful. It was so awful. Oh my gosh, like, being a person who hates yourself, being around people who love themselves is torture. Because it's so annoying that they can have this attitude towards themselves and treat themselves the way they do. And you're kind of like looking at them like they're evil, but somehow they're so much happier and nicer and everyone likes them more. So, yeah, that was my rant about how awful that process was. But I watched them and I noticed that there's some very identifiable key features to them versus people who don't like themselves. And one of those, for example, was that they choose how they feel over anything. It's like in bizarre scenarios, and I was thinking to begin with, this is not going to work out for them. Like, if you don't do what you have to do, even if you don't want to do it, you're screwed. Hell no. Time and time again, it's proven to me by virtue of watching them that when they make decisions in favor of what feels good, it just works out for them. I'm like, what the hell is this? That made no sense to me at all. But, so somebody who hates themselves, they'll be in a situation where it's like, okay, I need to win somebody's approval, and this is not going to come easy because I'm a horrible person innately, so I'm going to do whatever I can do and really be resentful of it, that I'm doing this thing that I don't want to do. And it sets you up, because people can't stand you when you've got that energy. But, like, these people would be like, you know what, it doesn't feel good, so I'm not going. And I was like, okay, so I identified several of these key behaviors. And I was like, all right, so you can't just love yourself, but what if you started doing these behaviors? What if you started replicating the behaviors? Could replicating the behaviors actually cause the emotional sensation of caring about yourself? So I made myself a guinea pig, and I made a few other people in my life a guinea pig, and it was a very, very good result. It was basically that, yes, by duplicating these behaviors, and by dealing with what comes up as a result of it, you absolutely can create a sensation of caring about yourself. So yeah, that was book 2.
And that seems like that's what, you seem like you do care about yourself and you love yourself.
It depends.
Yeah, well, that's probably normal.
I do, I mean, a lot more than where I was. But, I mean, one of the things I'm the most dedicated to in the world is basically authenticity with where I am. If I sit in this chair today and I sell you on the idea, which would be wonderful because it sells more books, sell you on the idea that I completely am in a space of self-love and everything, it does no justice to the reality of the recovery process from abuse.
Okay.
And it does no justice for people, for me to be in a state where I'm lying. The reality is that I, like everyone else, go through dips, valleys and peaks in terms of self-love. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done it. I've completely conquered. I feel amazing. I feel so confident, and I really like myself, and I'm treating myself well, and then one thing will happen in my life, and just like everyone else, I'm like back to those behaviors.
That's probably just called normal human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and so it's like part of what I'm really starting to talk about. Because what I'm watching is that it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle of abuse. Self-abuse. It becomes the relapse cycle, where it's like something causes you to relapse into the behavior, whether it's self-hate or something else. And then because you've relapsed, that becomes another reason to hate yourself. And it's like a spiral from hell. So it's very important for me to be in a position where I normalize that for people. So that not only, so that they get, this is okay. To have a relapse is okay.
And I like that you're honest, because a lot of leaders in the world that are out there healing aren't as honest sometimes, that everything is fantastic all the time, and that's just not possible because we are a human being. So thank you for sharing that part. So if you were to give any kind of what are you laughing about?
No, it's so true. I don't know. It's true, and it's really the bane of my existence in this field. I cannot stand how often I see people who are in my position. I understand them, because trust me, I get enough flack for being honest to sink a ship, but it drives me crazy when I see people who are in a state where, behind closed doors, to me, they're confessing that their marriage is ending, and it's like, you know, and I just don't know if I can even get on stage today, and they get on there like, my life is awesome. You know, buy my book, and I'm like, oh God. Like, this is why we hate ourselves. That's why we hate ourselves.
Yeah, because you think, oh, you'll get to this stage where everything's perfect all the time. And that's not reality either.
No.
I mean, no matter who you are, I don't care who you are. It's not ever going to happen because you're a human being. But if you were somebody that has your history, my history, what would you tell them to give them some hope? Because, you know, that's the one thing that's always taken away, is
yeah.
hope.
Okay, what would I tell them? What would I tell myself? I would tell them, I think, that what you went through has made you capable of connecting with human beings on a level that most people will never reach. Now, I know that it's hard for people to understand that, because when you've been abused, like I said, you're in a state of fear, and so you're feeling isolated. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that the distance between people is what's causing the issues on this planet. It is that incapacity to feel compassion, the incapacity to really connect with other people's pain that causes that. And it's why people are in so much pain around the world. So what I notice over and over again with survivors is that they have this depth of emotional connection. And if they could understand where that can go, the levels of intimacy that you can get to that you would never have dreamed of. Most people who are in just an average relationship never, ever, ever, ever reach that level of intimacy and connection. So it's almost like, by virtue of going to the extremes this way of all the horrible things you can experience, it's almost like you give birth to the other side of potential. Mm-hmm. You can experience that much safety because here's the principle in the universe. You can't understand white unless you know black. So it's almost like to the degree that you go black, you can understand the opposite degree of white. And that is something that's available to your consciousness, where it wouldn't even be a question in the mind of someone who hasn't experienced those levels of darkness.
I do think that is true, because a lot of people that have been through a lot of trauma seem to have a lot of gifts on the other side. Yeah. If they choose to use them. Not everybody chooses that. But if they choose, the gifts are amazing. Yeah. And the love and compassion, like you said, for other people is like, I don't think you would ever understand that if you didn't go through that. You know, there was something always in me, and I know it's a gift, there was just this thought that there's always a way, there's always a way, there's always a way to get through, there's got to be a different way. No, I cannot accept that. So that's how I live my life. Now, it can be annoying to my husband at times, but there's always got to be a way. Yeah. So that's what I feel like it gave me.
Really?
Yeah. Like there's got to be a way, this cannot be it. So that's kind of how I got through a lot of stuff.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really good. Part of me trying to heal from my trauma was realizing that nobody had an answer for me. I would love to sugarcoat it, but that's the reality. It got to the point where, trying to heal from all the trauma that I went through, I hit a dead end. It didn't matter what psychologist I went to, we would have that talk where they would sit down with me and say, darling, you've had developmental trauma. Trauma that is so severe that it has altered the way your brain is wired. You are going to look at a life that's going to look a certain way. You're probably never going to have a day where you don't have dissociative seizures. You're going to have issues in relationships probably for the rest of your life. You're going to have to live life a certain way. It's kind of like the talk that, it's like on a mental and emotional level, is the talk
it's like, and they're supposed to be helping, right?
Yeah. But it's this kind of talk that you'd get if you were paraplegic. Mm-hmm. You're not going to walk again. So, I didn't accept it, to be honest. Like, I would not swallow it. I was like, I'm not living this way. It's not happening. So, it was really disconcerting and put me into a super hopeless space that nobody had an answer, and that's why they kept saying that to me. Because they didn't want to own the shame. Right. They didn't want to say, look, none of us know what to do.
Exactly, that was the answer.
Yeah, the answer is none of us know what to do. But they didn't want to say that because it makes them feel inadequate. So it was scary to realize how damn alone I was. Yeah. And I realized that the answers were going to have to come from me.